Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I'm really excited today. I mean, super excited today. And I'm excited for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I just had the most amazing interview on my other podcast. I can't believe I'm saying that on my other podcast. Like, that's just so mind-boggling to me. Like, I never would have, if you told me that I'd be saying that statement, even 6 months ago, I would have said you're absolutely out of your mind. But yet here we are. And I just interviewed a dear friend and really a colleague, this woman does amazing coaching work and very similar to the way I do. And this interview specifically, I swear, it felt like it was almost like, I couldn't, there were moments where I couldn't tell who was interviewing who, right? Like, that's how amazing this interview was, like how just sort of, just this sharing of ideas and thoughts. So anyway, that's going to be published, in the next few days. My learning to surf partner, Adam, is away on business for the next few days. So I think he's back next week. So hopefully he'll get that up real quick, and I'll let you all know when it's up there, because it's a really beautiful, beautiful interview. And especially for all the women out there on my list, I want you to hear what Amy has to say about being a woman and about, the work that she does with women. And I think it's really, really beautiful. And if I can play the role of connecting some of you with this wonderful woman, I'd be so happy about that. So there it is. And so yeah, I'm pretty charged up about that. That literally just ended like a half hour ago. So like, I'm really kind of pumped up, which is awesome, because now the energy for this podcast is just overflowing. And I love that. Even though, I hardly need that, as you well know. I always get very excited when I'm doing this podcast for you. So anyway, yeah, I'm just really excited to be here again, as always. And today I want to kind of, you might call it like press the pause button for a second, and let's go over some real basics here. Okay. I'm not going to go over specific practices or anything like that, but I want to talk about how important practice is, but I want to talk about specifically how we can transform our practice, and I'm really excited to share this with you. Okay, so so anything that we learn to do, right? Anything, right? From the time that you learn to eat, the time you learn to walk, the time that, well, actually the eating and the walking is a little different, because you learn those as an infant. So the part of your brain that's responsible for learning things that was not really active. So let's not talk about those. Let's talk about something like riding a bike, right? Or learning a musical instrument, or learning a language, a second language other than the language that you cultivated as an infant, right? Anything that we've learned, right? There's two different ways in which we learn, okay? And these actually are evident and sort of present in two different, completely different areas of the brain, two different, completely different circuits of the brain, okay? And so the first part of learning something, right, it comes from, from knowledge, from understanding, from information, right? And so, like, for instance, learning a new language, right? Like you need somebody to teach you, okay, like, this is how it works, right? These are the verbs, these are the nouns, these are the, this is how you connect everything. This is the prepositions, all this is how the whole, breakdown and conjugation of the verbs goes and stuff like that. And so how, so that's very important, right? We need to understand that, right? Like, we need to grasp that. Same thing with riding a bike, right? You need somebody to tell you, this is how you ride a bike. And oftentimes that understanding might not come from a book or from somebody telling you. It could come from something that you see, right? So most of us, by the time we first try to ride a bicycle, we've seen plenty of other people riding bicycles. So we already have a sense of, like, okay, that's where I sit. This is where my feet go. This is where my hands go, and stuff like that. But that is that same knowledge, right? And we need that, right? We need some level of cognitive understanding, right, in order to learn something, right? That's a very crucial part of it. However, it's no more than 50% of the process, Right now, I always use riding a bike when I talk to clients, prospective clients, when I run my webinars, when I do my podcasts, when I'm here. I use this metaphor a lot. Okay, so pardon me if you've heard it before, but I think it's just so it's very very accurate, very sort of pertinent and sort of intuitive. So I want to share it again. Okay, so think riding a bicycle, right? If you were to come to me and say, Art, I want to learn how to ride a bicycle, right? Let's pretend you never saw a bicycle. You don't know what a bicycle is, right? I want to learn how to ride a bicycle. Art, can you tell me how to ride a bicycle, right? My answer would be that I can tell you about a bicycle, right? And I could tell you everything there is to know about a bicycle. I happen to be pretty expert in bicycle. I know the different alloys and metals that they use to make them. I know how the suspension works. I know how everything's connected. I know which parts have to move freely, which parts need to be bolted down. I know how the brakes work. I know different types of brakes. I know, front brake of back brake. I know the difference and how you're going to use those and what circumstances. I know about different seat types. I know different wheel types. I know how the gears work. I know how the changing of the gears work. I can show you how that cable attaches to this mechanism from where your hand is. I can tell you all of this. Right. And this, I've just barely scraped the surface, right? Like I could spend a year compiling a book to tell you everything you could possibly ever know about a bicycle. Right? I could do interviews with bicycle manufacturers. I could do interviews with professional bike riders. I could interview people who have been, who have had injuries from riding bikes. I could do all of that. I could give you this wealth of knowledge, like 1,000-page book I could write about this, right? And literally, it is conceivable that somehow I could touch every bit of knowledge that there could possibly be about riding a bicycle. Now, in terms of knowledge, this would be as full as it gets, right? There's no more knowledge that we could possibly cram in here, right? And so I've told you everything there is to know about riding a bicycle. Does that mean that you can ride a bicycle? I don't think so. Right? Everyone who's listening to this who has ever ridden a bicycle knows that no, it's not enough. But again, that knowledge, some of that knowledge is vital to understanding how to ride a bicycle, right? So like if nobody told you that you put your hands here on the handlebars, right? Then you might try to ride, like imagine you never saw a bike before. When you try to go to ride the bike, if you don't know where to put your hands and your feet and where to sit, well, maybe you try sitting on it backwards and wondering why it's not working, right? So it's very important understanding this knowledge, right? However, it does not give you the experience that you need to understand, to really be able to ride the bicycle. Now, again, this is true in playing a musical instrument. It's true in learning a sport, learning a new language, learning something, anything in school, learning how to meditate, right? It's true of all of it. Right? That there is a cognitive knowledge, and that's one circuit of our brain that's understanding things in a cognitive way, but that only tells half the story. The other half of the story, if you really want to learn how, or if you want to, develop the skill to do something, not the knowledge of how to do it, but the skill of how to do it, well, then that requires learning on a different level. And that kind of learning is what we call experiential learning, right? And so what that means is that there's no way for me to describe to you the wobbly feeling that you're going to get when you first get on the bicycle, right? There's no way I could try, I could certainly help, like I could warn you that that's what's going to happen. I could tell you that the way to get through that is to keep going forward, don't stop. I could tell you all that, right? But until you feel that wobble and until you feel the fact that pushing the pedal helps to steady that wobble, until you feel that, until you experience that, you're not really going to understand it. You're going to understand it cognitively, but you're not going to understand it in a physical, embodied way. right? And so that's why there's two kinds of practice, two kinds of learning that have to be done. And this is what happens in school, right? This is why you go through, writing papers and taking tests, right? That's the experience of exercising this knowledge that you've had, right? So like when you take a course in creative writing, for instance, right? They will tell you all the different rules and tell you all the different ways to, start your chapter, how to, characters, how to do, conversation, dialogue kind of stuff. They'll tell you all about that. But again, that doesn't make you a writer, right? Writers have to write. And in that writing, just like in that riding the bike, you're going to learn things about this thing that you're doing that no words, no book, no video, no podcast, no anything could ever tell you except for the experience. Okay. And so that's what brings me to the point and the idea and the subject of practice. Okay. Because that's the key right now. My own personal story. I don't know if any of you remember me sharing this with you before. I apologize if I'm repeating myself. Might be worth listening to again, though. Maybe it's something that will help. So when I first learned mindfulness, and I do mean learned, right? Like at first I learned. I read a couple of books, one amazing book by Thich Nhat Hanh, another amazing book by Jon Kabat-Zinn, and I read these books, right? And I understood the concepts that they were talking about. And to me, because my whole life had been done that way, right? I thought that was enough. Right? I thought that it was enough just to understand, okay, yes, be present, don't judge, accept, don't cling. I get it. I get all of this. I understand it. I can live this, no problem. Right? And so I went out into the world and I just lived the way that I had learned through a few of these books, those two books and a few others, right? And at the time, for about 5 or 6 months, people were coming up to me and being like, dude, what have you done to yourself? Like, you're like, this transition that I've seen, this transformation that I've seen is amazing. Like, how did you do it? What did you do? Tell me. And I would just, I'd say, yeah, I'm living in the present moment. I'm being non-judging. I'm being accepting, just using all the knowledge, just, kind of reflecting back the knowledge that I had absorbed, right? And so what happened is, again, for 5 or 6 months, I mean, life was pretty blissful this way. I felt really, really good about who I was becoming and what I was doing and stuff, right? But what happens then is that life comes along, right? Life comes along, and sometimes it reaches out with a tender caress, right? And a hug and a kiss on your cheek, right? But sometimes life reaches out with a slap across the face, right? I mean, let's be honest, at that time in my life, there was a lot of turbulence. I was selling a business. I was trying to sell a house. I was, there's a lot going on back then, right? Actually, it was a little bit before selling the business, but I was trying to run a business. A lot of stuff going on, right? And so in that stuff, right, comes the triggers, right? Because what happens is, right, and this is why mindfulness is not about thinking about something. And this is the lesson that I learned the hard way, and I'm trying to teach you the easy way here, right? I want you to learn in a 30-minute podcast what I learned over a 6-month period of trial and effort, and specifically a month of really difficult time, right? Because what happens is when we become triggered, right? When we feel afraid of something, when we feel threatened by something, right? That's when we purposefully, right? It's not intentionally, but it's by design that we go back into our automatic reactivity, right? It's part of the stress response, right? Like if you're being chased by a tiger, right? Your body does not want you to stop and consider like, oh, I wonder how I should try to get away from this tiger. I wonder what the best route would be. I wonder, the most effective course of action right now. You're already lunch, right? Like you're already in the tiger's mouth at that point by the time you ask a couple of those questions, right? So your body, right? The organism that is your body, purposefully, switches you from this place of like free will to a place of complete automatic reactivity. And that's by design, right? But the thing is that for most of us, it's not because we're being chased by a tiger. It's because of a business thing or a relationship thing or something that in a societal kind of way that's triggering us, right? And so what happened with me was that after like 5 or 6 months of again feeling pretty blissful and everything's going great, one day, and after this very turbulent time of a lot of change, a lot of transition, a lot of challenges, right? It was one day where my wife and I were riding our bikes to the park with the kids, and the whole idea was that we are going to have this wonderful day and all the good times and stuff. And it was, from the minute we started the bike ride, things were a little tense, right? And it was I was impatient and I was, kind of snappy and really not, I was not present. I was not accepting. I was not patient. I was not compassionate. I was not any of those things that I had read about from Thich Nhat Hanh and Jon Kabat-Zinn and Eckhart Tolle and all these other books that I read, right? I wasn't doing any of that, right? Instead, I was back to my reactive self, right? That I hadn't seen in 6 months prior, but here it was, right? And there was a moment that I'm so grateful for this moment because it really changed everything for me, right? That my wife in this just what really was turning out to be a horrible afternoon, right? It was like, what the heck are we doing here kind of thing, But she literally grabbed me by my shirt. And I mean, I think she did. It feels like she did. She probably didn't. That's not really her style, but it feels like she like shook me by the lapels, and put my face right up to hers. And she said, I'm sure I'm projecting this into some kind of movie that I saw or something like that. But it was very, very forceful that she said, "You are not the person you had become, and it sucks." Right? She said that to me. And those words just weighed so heavily on me. Seriously. Like, I mean, it walloped me like, my gosh, like I was just clubbed over the head. Like it really. And I remember just like it was one of those moments where like the whole world seemed to, like the whole universe seemed to just descend upon me in that moment of clarity, but like overwhelming, like, it was clear, but it was like, holy crap, like this is, like, wow, this is so heavy and so intense, that I actually had to walk away from my family for a few minutes. I said, I'm going to go over there for a few minutes. Okay. I'm not going to be far. If you need me, call me, but I need a few minutes. All right. And I went over to the other side of the playground or whatever, outside the playground, something like that, under a tree over there. And I just sat with what my wife had told me. Right. I sat with that for a moment. And at first, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be very honest with you. At first, it felt like heavy. It felt guilty. It felt shameful. It felt, yucky, right? Which was my judgment, right? And that's how it was coming back. You see what I'm saying? So the idea then was that, having heard that in such an impactful way, it was the wake-up call that I needed. Right. And I'm so grateful that this happened because even though it was uncomfortable and even though it was hard for me to hear that and hard to process it because I just spent 6 months, kind of working on myself, but not really doing the work, just thinking thinking about the work and thinking I was doing the work. And here I had somebody who's the closest person in my life telling me that I was a failure, and that was a hard thing to hear. Right. But it was exactly what I needed to hear because shortly after that, I committed to doing the practice, right? And that's when I realized that, and subsequently I had learned through people like Dr. Dan Siegel and Daniel Goleman and Richard Davidson and all the stuff that I continued to, again, knowledge that I continued to absorb, and I continue to this day because, again, it's very important to have the knowledge, right? It's not the one or the other, it's both, right? But what I learned is that there's another way in which I needed to learn this, and that was an embodied way. Right. And that's where practice comes in. Right. And so it's just like riding a bike. Right. That there are things that you're going to learn in the process of riding a bike that no person could ever put into words for you. Okay. So the same thing is true for meditation and mindfulness practices. And it's when we're sitting there and we're quiet and we're just focusing in on our breath. right? Which is the way that I teach meditation. There's many other ways to do it, but this is the way that I use and the way I teach as well, both practice and teaching. That when we're in that silence and just focusing in on our breath, that answers come to us, but it's just so incredible. It's answers to questions we didn't know that we asked, is the way that I like to think of it, the way I like to feel it, right? Because that's how it feels. It's like you come to these realizations that you had no idea. Right. And you didn't even know that you didn't know it. Right. Like that's the profundity here. Right. That you just you experience something on this level that becomes a true embodied understanding, which then becomes intuition. Right. And that's the key, right? So that when life comes over and slaps you in the face, right, and everything's going haywire and everything seems like it's all upside down and the walls are caving in on you and all that stuff, right? That's the time where you are going to go back to your intuition. Right. And so if your intuition is that same reactive, judging, impatient, panicking, stressed out, angry, whatever it is, if that's your intuition, well, then that's where you're going to go. Right. But if you develop a new intuition through the embodied practices of meditation and mindfulness, well, then that's your new place that you're going to go. Right. So now for me, 6 years after that fateful day at the park with my wife and kids, 7 years now, maybe close to 8 years actually. But all of this time, now my my instinctive place, my intuitive place that I go is present, is accepting, is tolerant, is patient, is non-judging. Like that's who I have become. And I never would have become this by just reading the books. Okay? So that's why practice is so vitally important when it comes to this work. Okay? However, okay, there's more, but wait, there's more. The practice itself, right? And this is completely understandable, right? For most people that when we get into this practice, right? And this is something I just talked to Amy about in the podcast I just recorded, is that when we first start a practice, we feel tight, we feel tight. We feel like we have to be serious about it, right? We have to be, work hard at this, I'm trying to develop this skill, right? So there's two things I want to say about that. Okay, number one, as one of my client actually told me the other day, is that we don't practice meditation to get better at meditation. We practice meditation to get better at life. Right now, I don't know if I would say the better at. That's a semantic thing we could kind of talk about. We could dissect that, but really, there's a truth to that statement, right? That it's not about just like we don't practice riding a bicycle to get better at riding a bicycle. We don't practice scales on a guitar to play the scales on a guitar better. We practice the scales on the guitar so that when we're playing a song, we can do that with our fingers to help the song. Right? So I want to invite you though, because again, a lot of times when we're initially starting out on this work, we're very tight. We're very, serious about it. Right? And so I want to invite you to consider making the practice playful, making it a game, making it fun. Right? Because it can be that, right? And one of the great ways to get to that place of making it fun and making it playful is to sort of cultivate a sense of curiosity about it. Right? So when you're sitting there doing meditation, and this is true even outside of this conversation, right? There's no good meditation, there's no bad meditation, right? It's just what you do for this period of time, right? and it's not necessary to think of it as good or bad or successful or failure. Those concepts don't apply, right? Just like there's no good bike ride or bad bike ride. I mean, maybe there were things that you saw along your bike ride that you loved. Maybe it rained on your bike ride, which you felt was uncomfortable. But that doesn't make the bike ride good or bad. It just means that it rained. How you label that is how is whether you judge it as good or bad, which we talked about yesterday, right? But the concept then, right, or what I'm trying to hopefully inspire you here is to consider the practice as a form of playfulness, right? And consider it as something that's light and soft and easy, effortless even. Because that's what it is, right? The effort, and the difficulty of meditation, and this also applies to all the informal practices, off the cushion practices as well. But the difficulty that we have in meditation is when our mind gets caught up in the thoughts, right? And we kind of follow the thoughts, right? The difficulty is in letting go of those thoughts. It's never something where you're trying to wrestle something or trying to beat something into submission. It's letting go. It's a very easy process. It's actually completely without effort. It's actually the opposite of effort, right? Effort is holding. Letting go is releasing the effort. And so even from that standpoint, it is a very playful concept. Right? And it's something that it doesn't require more effort. It requires less effort. It requires more sort of, just again, playfulness. Right? And so I would really encourage you and this is something you can it's about how you look at it. Right. And again, that's a practice, right? If you set your intention over and over and over again and say, I want this to be playful. It should be a playful thing. This should be fun. Right. Then it's going to become that. Right. The more you tell yourself that it's fun, the more you're going to believe yourself that it's fun. And so I encourage you to check that out. And if you have any questions about it or you want to, kind of explore this further, or maybe you're just stuck on that and you don't know how to stop being so hard on yourself about it, well, then that would be a perfect reason to book a free coaching session with me. And you're going to find a link in the description for that, as I do every day. I want you to use it. I really do. I think it'd be a great thing for you. It'd be a great thing for me, and it would be a great thing for both of us. So if it interests you, please click the link below, schedule the call, and let's talk about this, okay? And let's get you into a more playful way of meditating, because not only is that more sustainable, which it is, right, but it's actually more effective too. I mean, we know that from little children, right? When little children learn through play, they learn much deeper, and they learn much more efficaciously, all right? And so it's a question of, allowing yourself to be playful with it. And I can help you do that. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I wish you well, and I wish you playfulness. I'll be back again tomorrow, talk about some more stuff. And I have a really, really, really good topic tomorrow. It's going to be... I'm not even going to tease you with little heads. It's going to kind of include the stuff that we talked about today, but taking it to a much bigger level. And I'm so excited for that. So wish you well. You'll just have to wait till tomorrow. Talk to you then. Have a great day. Bye-bye, everybody.